Hey there, lady. My name is Molly Conley, and I'm devoted to helping women reinvent their love lives, whether that's after divorce, dating on and off the apps, or in their committed relationship. Why? Because I've been there. I'm a former college athlete who filed for divorce 3 years into marriage, swam in the online dating pool into my late 30s, and now I am married to the man of my spreadsheet dreams who I met 4 months before the world shut down. As a dating and relationship coach, I help my clients shift the focus from being obsessed with finding Mr. Right to shifting to herself as Miss Right Now. We build a foundation filled with clarity, connection, and confidence, knowing she is worth waiting for. Each week on the podcast, I'll bring you love life insights and savvy guests, where you will receive the courage to release programmed limiting beliefs. Discover patterns and behaviors restricting you from finding and attracting quality men, and ways to choose yourself first so you can build a foundation for a healthy relationship with yourself and a partner. Hello, ladies. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, my husband, Brad, is joining me for another couch conversation about why men ghost.
Hello.
Okay, so let's start with what ghosting means. The simple way to describe this is when a person you're interested in disappears without a trace, whether that's the beginning stages of talking on the app or even after a few dates. Personally, I feel that online dating has made it a lot easier to ghost. It's practically normalized and accepted as part of the risks you take when online dating. And a 2019 study published by Sage Journals said that 74% of the respondents to their survey said they believed ghosting was an appropriate way to end a relationship. But that doesn't mean it's not wrong or emotionally painful and confusing. So, Brad, let's talk about your own ghosting experiences.
Yeah, I definitely had a couple that happened when I was, online dating. I know I met someone on Bumble. And we actually, chatted on Bumble a little bit and started texting quite a bit back and forth, planning on going out, talking about going out and just chatting on a regular basis. And she kind of kept having to put off going out and going out on our first date. And this went on for several weeks, but we were still chatting and texting. And then all of a sudden, just no response. We were like getting ready to set up a date and then didn't hear anything back. So I think that was my first experience with ghosting, because ghosting was kind of that term just came into power, I guess, when I was in the online dating scene. So that would be my first experience with ghosting.
Which one was when? When did you start the online dating scene, though?
Oh, well, a long time ago.
Okay.
before ghosting existed. I mean, even prior to my, being married the first time.
Right. And I feel like
about 2015.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of these terms that people use nowadays, like, this was not shit you talked about because it just happened in like the early years before online dating. Like,
it didn't have a name.
Ghosting and love bombing. And it's like, yeah, that's all online dating.
Yeah, exactly. It was just before that's online dating. Now it's just, specific names for these things that happen. So that's what we're here to talk about it. There was another one. It's a little more embarrassing for me, maybe, but I, went on a first date with someone I met through Bumble. Had a good lunch date. Kind of talked about maybe going on another one. I thought things went pretty well. We did actually text back and forth a few times over the next week, and it seemed promising. And then, just wasn't getting any response. So even for a few days, I'd send like one text a day, and no response. Just kind of checking in. It's like, trying to make those excuses you make when that happens. Mm-hmm. And I even a few weeks later, I said, well, I'll send one more just to check and see maybe, and I kind of said, just making sure you're not interested or something like that. And of course I did not get a response. So I know what it's like to think about that and kind of obsess over why that happened. So that's probably my biggest example.
Yeah. I would say that I have been ghosted a few times, but the one that really stuck out to me was probably the last person I tried dating before I took a really serious break. I think for almost 6 months before I then got back online right before I met you. This person and I had been chatting, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks on the app, and then exchanged phone numbers and decided that we'd go on a date. and the first date seemed to go pretty well. And it seemed almost instantaneously like we were texting every day, trying to figure out when we could have the chance to meet up again. We probably had, I would say, like maybe 3 or 4 more dates. Like we had been dating for a few weeks, and then out of nowhere, he just stopped texting me. And I had already told my parents, actually, no, I'd already told my mom that this person, I was interested in someone. And I had a rule where I wasn't going to talk about my online dating life because my mom gets super invested. In fact, she got so invested in this person that she was asking me if she could buy Husker game day tickets for the Nebraska-Iowa game. And I was like, no, let's just see how this pans out. And I don't really want to take him to a football game with my parents. So what happened was, I tried to get an answer from him about why. And honestly, I text that quite a bit, wanting that answer. And finally, like days later, he couldn't come up with anything other than it's just not going to work. And what I also find really interesting is that then this person would text me randomly months later. Like I remember him texting, 6 months later, asking me what I was doing and if I wanted to hang out again. And I said, sure. And thought about hanging out like a month later. And when I met up with him, it was just not the same. Like I had already grown so much as a person that I was just like, am I really interested the same way? And in fact, right after you and I met, like he had always had this thing of like texting me on Thanksgiving, and you and I were already committed to each other. And I never responded to that text, and he never sent me another message again, but I also blocked him. So, yeah. So Brad, do you have an example of when you might've been in the situation where you could have ghosted and maybe actually didn't?
Yeah. So, well, like I said, when that term kind of ghosting came about and it was becoming a thing, I did make a conscious choice saying to myself, I'm not going to do that. And I knew it probably wasn't going to be easy, but I'm like, I just didn't think, having it happened to me and now having a name and being a thing and a trend, I didn't want to do that. So I just decided I wasn't going to do that. And I did have the opportunity a few times to send those texts. And I took my time with it. I thought I was very good about the way I worded it. And there was different things each time, maybe. There was one time I just felt that we weren't in the same, place in our lives. And so we weren't really synced up with where we were going. There was a time when I just said, I just don't think it's going to work out. I had fun. I think you're nice, but I just feel it's not going to go anywhere. I don't think we're a match, just along those lines. It was never any criticism. I never said you did this or I don't like that or,
right.
There's no reason to do that. That's some of that's, maybe implied, but I just wanted to at least send a final text and say that. The big one was I don't like wasting. I'm not going to waste my time and I'm not going to waste your time. If I feel that I don't want to go on the next date, I'm not going to just go on the next date to try to make you feel better before I don't go on another date with you. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me.
Real time out quick, because I know that there's a lot of people, this isn't part of our discussion that we were going to talk about, but a lot of people say, oh, but even if the first date didn't turn out well, you should just go on the second date. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. If you don't think the first date went well and there was no real reason to continue to go on the second date, don't fucking do it. You're speaking from people that have done online dating for numerous years. It is a waste of your time. And all you're going to do is hypothetically get emotionally attached to that person some way, somehow. And it's just going to drag on and it really won't work out. At least that's what I have actually had to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. If you're in the middle of the first date and you're like, I definitely don't want to do this again, okay, fine. You don't have to tell them right that second, but when you start texting about setting up the next date, just be honest, and I'll be honest. I had a couple good experiences with it, and sending that text where I just got one time I just got a response saying, okay, just fine. I got a response, maybe asking for a little bit more information. And I just said, I just don't think it's going to work out. And I got a response one time saying, okay. But then the next night got some drunk texts. She was feeling a little bit, angry, I suppose, and went off a little bit on me. And I understand it. That's her right. But I had never criticized her. I never said that I thought she was a bad person, or that that there's anything negative about her.
Mm-hmm.
So I was ready for that. That's going to happen if you're going to be honest. So
yeah, I think honestly, in the beginning of my on and off again trying to online date for years, and I remember this person because this is how much it impacted me. I went on a date with someone. His name was Ben, and he lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, if you guys haven't listened before. And he and I drove up to go to a little neighborhood called Blackstone and have dinner and drinks. And when we went to pay, we both thought it was hilarious that we had the same banking card. But what wasn't hilarious was the next day when I went to go check out at Target and I had his card and he had mine. I honestly had thought the date went really well, so it wasn't like a big deal to me. But he seemed really, frustrated or whatnot. And so we planned to meet the next day halfway through at a different town, and exchanged cards. And I was thinking, like, hey, when do you want to set the next date? He's like, I'll have to look at my calendar 100% because of whatever he was doing. It was like a day-to-day something after work. And so continuously asked about the next date. And he finally had written out this response that was probably about 2 to 3 paragraphs long about why it was just not going to work out between us. He was being very honest and he was being nice. And I will tell you, I sat back and I was in shock. Not that we were going to have a second date, but how he was so emotionally intelligent and compassionate for me and my feelings, that he was like so genuine too as he was coming through and being like, it's not you. It's just like these are certain things, like there's certain things that I really want in life. And I don't think that we both have that match in those areas. And so I responded to him and I'm like, hey, can I use this template or use this like message as a template for myself? And I still have it because he said, oh yeah, of course you can. And so I used to create my messages from that template that he gave me of like saying, I'm not interested in you, to other men. And I would be honest, and not like calling out like things I didn't like, just, hey, there's these big things that are different about us that I know from my past is something that I can't deal with. I'm not religious, so I'm not going to convert to being a Catholic. Like there's certain things like that come up, and you have to know what you want and what type of lifestyle you want. And so I do remember getting some really pissed off text messages. So I decided every time I send it is I immediately block the person so that I would never have to deal with the things that you just talked about. To them, yes, that might have seemed like ghosting, but it was also for me a way of protecting myself by leaving a nice message and then be done with all of it.
I think that's fair because you're choosing to send the message. You're focusing on yourself and not them. You're saying this about yourself, like I realize this or I want this, and yeah, you're not criticizing the other person. I think that's important too. If you're gonna have a message like that you can use over and over again or something, talk about I, not you.
Yeah, that's actually something that later on that I'm probably going to talk about is having difficult conversations, is focusing sadly on yourself, putting a lot of the shifting and focus on yourself so that the other person doesn't feel attacked. But anyways, let's now get into the real question from a man's perspective, Brad. Why do men ghost?
I think the general overarching reason is because honesty involves risk. If you're going to be honest, even if it's at the minimal level, saying, I don't think we're a match or I don't think it's going to work out, as we pointed out, you're risking some drama. You're risking, some criticism, maybe being labeled as a jerk or an asshole or just other random stuff that may or may not apply. And honesty can be uncomfortable. Honesty is probably uncomfortable for most people in that situation. Mm-hmm. It can be hard to tell somebody that you're not interested in them, because maybe it's happened to you before and you're like, and you didn't feel good about it. So you're thinking, well, I'll save the person those emotions by not saying anything. And that, obviously causes a whole bunch more problems, but, being honest is uncomfortable. Having emotions uncomfortable. Letting someone down is not easy, and it's just easier to do nothing. And that kind of protects, you think that's protecting them, and you're protecting yourself. So you kind of rationalize it by saying, well, they'll get the hint, they'll understand.
They'll stop contacting me.
Yeah, they'll stop texting. They'll stop texting eventually. So that way you don't have to deal with the uncomfortableness or with your emotions over their emotions. And you're protecting yourself. You don't want to be the bad guy. So we'll just ignore it, and it'll go away.
Yeah.
And they think guys think they're doing you a favor by not telling you they're not interested in sparing you those feelings, but then you're left with a whole set of other feelings when you don't get a text. So yeah, in the end, it's the easy way out. And it's just not being brave.
Right. What I really think too is that ghosting is a sign of some deeper issues too that could not be visible to you yet, that could affect your relationship in the long term. So you did bring up some of the things about emotions, but sometimes people have a lack of empathy and compassion, possibly for the other person, because it's online dating. Like, there's so many studies that show that the person that we are behind a computer and behind a phone is completely different than how we would act in person. So a lot of people might talk about how like trolls do certain things. Like it's the same sort of emotional distancing, right? Then there's the inability to be open and vulnerable about their thoughts and feelings, which honestly can be tied to so many things that the person hasn't dealt with themselves, ones that they have to be ready for and willing to do on their own. So honestly, ladies, don't think that you can fix or help him with that. That's something that he's going to have to do on his own. And then the biggest issue that I see, and it's critical for a healthy relationship, is the lack of communication skills. Brad, do you have any comments or anything else to follow up with that?
I think, one lesson is if a guy does ghost you, if you don't hear from him, you really automatically know it's not going to work out. It wasn't going to work out. He's not the one. It's not worth dating. The natural reaction is to obsess over, okay, why? What did he think of me? Why did this person choose not to want to go out with me again? And, that really gets more into your area too, about focusing on yourself and what you can do to deal with that, because it's not worth it. It's not worth obsessing over and beating yourself up, or waiting 3 or 4 more weeks and then just checking again to see if you're still not interested in me. And like I did, just to make sure, maybe they got a new phone, maybe they changed their number, stuff like that. It's not worth putting yourself through that. So if it happens to you, I think Molly can help give you the tools to deal with it and
move on.
Move on. Yeah. Turn it to a positive, just move on and not have it affect you so much.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of a little bit of that is like the communication skills. Like if someone doesn't have that up front, your marriage to someone that can't communicate is going to be extremely difficult. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
That means that they can't have difficult conversations around family gatherings, meaning like, what do you want to do about the in-law situation or sister situation or brother situation? What do you want to do about money, like finances? People can't have those difficult conversations. Like everything starts to build on top of the other if they don't know how to communicate their feelings about what they want and their boundaries and all these other things. So it is a very big red flag for me when I was dating, and Brad had, I'm just going to, because it's so cute. I loved one part of your profile that said, I'm a conversationalist. And I was like, oh, we'll see about that.
With the right person.
With the right person.
Yeah.
So, but when you're online dating or just dating in general, I have a few recommendations to like cut ghosting out of your dating life. And I know you're going to comment on this, but it involves more action from you. So first and foremost, recognize your dating patterns. Are you dating the same type of man and having similar outcomes? So reflect on what you start seeing, who you're attracted to or have been attracted to, and what behaviors you're allowing yourself to put up with, which leads me to setting boundaries for yourself. Most people think setting boundaries has to deal with telling others what you won't stand for, but these sort of boundaries are for yourself. So what behaviors are you no longer going to put up with or you're going to do in your dating life? A lot of this comes from self-sabotaging behaviors like people-pleasing, perfectionism, justification, like making excuses of why someone does something. There's so many ways we can self-sabotage ourselves in our relationships. And last but not least, be 1000% upfront about what you want. If you are looking for a serious relationship, you state it in your profile. When you're messaging back and forth, I'm looking for this. When you're on the first date, as a reminder, this is what I'm looking for. And if you don't want that, I would love it if you would tell me right now. Confidently ask for what you want. And if he's not looking for what you want, end it, because it's a waste of your time. You're not going to be able to be like, oh, well, we went on 3 dates and he said he's not interested in a long-term relationship, but once we start dating for 3 or 4 months, he'll change his mind. Don't do that to yourself. That's you justifying that, oh, he's just not ready yet, but if he stays with me, I can fix him and he'll just eventually fall in love with me.
Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't happen. I mean, back to don't waste your own time and don't waste theirs. But obviously, more importantly, don't waste your time, thinking those things, thinking things will change, or justifying to yourself that you can change things, or that what he's already told you and what you've already told him is going to change. So, yeah, I think that's excellent advice.
Okay. My only one thing that I was thinking is I did say cutting ghosting out of your dating life, but really this is you just not putting up with other crap. Like you doing all this work up front so that 100% that if someone ghosts you, you can't take it personally because you've done every single thing for yourself and communicated your needs, your boundaries, and what you're looking for. Right. So I did say cutting it out 100%, but it's because you've all done all of these things. Brad, anything about that?
Yeah, because it's my point to that was, well, it could still happen. You can only control so much. You can control yourself. You can't control other people. So even if you follow the steps and do it, do the work yourself and do it, you think you should do, it may still happen. But at that point, you should have the tools and be prepared to deal with it and move on.
Right.
I don't think it's possible to cut it out of your life 100%, but yeah, you can prepare yourself, do the work on yourself, and be ready. Knowing online dating or dating in general, things happen and you got to be ready for them and not beat yourself up when they do. Just say that's part of the dating life and move on, because you'll be way better off for it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and conclude this couch conversation. If you ladies have any other topics that you want Brad and I to discuss together, you can always contact me on Instagram, send me a message or leave a comment on a post that's going to be a podcast episode. You can also send me an email or even just get on my email list by going to my website. So I will leave that information in the show notes. So thank you, honey, for joining me again. I know we have quite a few other ones lined up, but I can't wait for us to do this again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Reinventing the Arena podcast. If you loved this episode or even the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. It helps more ambitious women like yourself find this show and learn how to have a healthy relationship with themselves and a partner they love. Until next time, remember to believe in yourself, that you were meant for a better relationship, not only with fully knowing and loving yourself for who you are, but knowing that there's a man out there for you. You're not too picky. You're not too much. You are enough. And the right man knows this too.